Welcome everyone to our webcast, What's New in the Autodesk 2022 Courseware. To get things started, I will pass the presentation over to Rhonda.
Great, thank you, Corrine. Hello and welcome everyone. We hope you're doing well. We appreciate you taking time to join us today for this update on our new learning guides for the Autodesk 2022 software. I'm joined today by Jennifer McMillan, who's our manager for learning content development. She's also our author and resident expert for the Inventor and Fusion 360 titles, among others. So Jennifer will be reviewing the ASCENT 2022 release roadmap and highlighting our recent and future release. Just a bit about us. ASCENT has been an Autodesk content partner for over 20 years, so quite a long time, and we've been a designated authorized publisher with Autodesk since 2010. To participate in this program, we need to meet a strict set of requirements set by Autodesk, including a minimum volume of published content. We need to adhere to learning objectives and also to specific technical and quality requirements. Our relationship with Autodesk gives us access to beta software so that we can review changes that may affect our learning guides. Our team begins the update process as early as possible so that our introductory level titles can be published when the software is released. Over the years, we've invested in our team of dedicated developers and writers to be able to expand our offerings and address the business needs of our customers worldwide. For example, this gives you a high-level overview of the broad range of titles that we currently offer. The team monitors market changes and new products coming out, as well as customer feedback to see where something new can be added. You can quickly locate a copy of our release roadmap as shown here on the homepage of the ASCENT website. And our development team's been hard at work already, and over the next several months we'll continue to do so. So many more titles will be released in the coming months. And I'm now going to pass it over to Jennifer to give you those highlights.
Great, thank you, Rhonda. So what I want to do over the next number of slides here is just discuss in terms of kind of all of the books that we released during the year. So I'm going to focus on many of those titles, but definitely can't cover all of them. We have a really wide portfolio of books. So to get started, AutoCAD Fundamentals, certainly has been over the years kind of our flagship course. We still sell most of this course. It's the highest volume. So a really big focus is put to releasing this book as soon as the software is released each year. So like all years, we already have these books available, and both in the mixed unit version as well as metric. There wasn't a ton of changes that affected this guide. A little bit of new content that affected kind of the new Start tab redesign, so that was certainly covered, as well as the blocks palette. But past that, it was really a focus on, making sure there was no issues with any of the exercises, updating images, and that type of thing. So not a ton of change. What's fantastic about that is it really gave us some time to release a new book this year. So every few years, we put out an update class, and this is the year for it. So we will be releasing very shortly, so we're looking at early June, an update class for AutoCAD that's going to cover enhancements for 2021 and 2022. So it's a 2-year release of enhancements. With that guide, we're going to be looking at having kind of a chapter on general improvements, basic command enhancements, things that changed, looking at advanced sharing commands, collaboration tools, and more. So certainly keep an eye out for that book as it will be coming soon. And I know many of you as resellers look for that. So that's a great book that will be coming soon. We're also a little ahead of schedule with our AutoCAD 3D drawing and modeling guide. So you can see on the schedule, initially it was planned out for June. I actually got email just before this call that it was approved with our printer. So we should actually see it go live either later today or first thing tomorrow morning. So our courseware developer for the AutoCAD products is Renew Muthu, and she also works on this 3ds Max learning guide. So she hasn't put a lot of effort yet into looking at this topic, but it is the next one on her list. So she will be having that out in June. As a high level, we looked briefly at the topics, and we see a few things that will be updated in our guides. They've made some effort, they being Autodesk, has made some effort to enhance some of the Smart Extrude functionality, which really makes the modeling within 3ds Max a little bit easier. So that's going to be incorporated into Chapter 5. Additionally, there's a new presentation mode, which will, it's in terms of the layout of your screen, it's going to be into the Chapter 1 of the course, which really actually gives people a really great way of giving kind of that full screen mode with no borders or any of the helper information that Autodesk 3ds Max has. So, it's appropriate for presentations. And then finally, we also noticed that there is some enhancements to rendering. So some of the steps and the workflows will change. It doesn't look like it's a major thing, but certainly if you're teaching this guide, you'll want to review that chapter as well as kind of around Arnold rendering material when prior to teaching the class. And then the next one is our manufacturing list of titles. And as Rhonda mentioned, these are my titles. So I work on creating all of this material. We were able to release 2 books actually this year with the release of the software, which was in early April, with the first guide being our Introduction to Solid Modeling, which is kind of that fundamental level change. There wasn't too much that changed in the guide. Definitely Autodesk is putting, still focusing that change of interface from the dialog boxes to palettes for many of the features. So there certainly was a few features that updated. Fillets would be the main one that really affects the intro level guide. There's also a little bit of new content that we incorporated. So within assembly, some of the new functionality around the model browser and being able to identify constraint states. So that affected the model browser and all of the images. So certainly the images were all updated, and the content was described directly in the book and the exercises. And then instant properties, and this is actually a brand new topic within the Bill of Materials chapter, and certainly be prepared to review that prior to teaching your classes so that you know what's going on there. And again, we released an update class this year. So much like AutoCAD, we had a 2-year span, so it includes the 2021 and 2022 functionalities. This is, again, a 1-day class. There looks like I think there's about 7 chapters in this guide, and it starts kind of off with, much like any other year, was kind of that interface and general enhancements that affect all of the environments. Then there's enhancements around part modeling, assembly modeling, drawing, sheet metal, frame generator, and the big one is a brand new chapter on model states. So as an Inventor user, you probably know that one of the big new functionalities is model states as a replacement for level of detail. So this is covered in this course as well as a full chapter with exercises as well. So we were pretty excited to have that guide released. With advanced part modeling, that is also right now being worked on by our editors, and I anticipate this will be out again just before the end of May. So keep an eye out for that one. Now, with this one, there was new content, and the majority of it was this model states functionality, and it incorporated kind of a whole new chapter in there. And if you've taught this class, you know that this is a really full 2 days. So in order to kind of work with that, I really did have to rework the chapter order. I talked to a number of trainers to get their feedback on how this should work and how they teach the class and what the students tend to be using the most. So, I definitely had to fit model states in there. And what I did to make room for that was I moved one of the topics around working with imported data and editing the data that's been imported into an appendix. So, Autodesk over the years have really made a great effort to improve how data is being imported into Inventor. So that content, from what I was hearing from trainers, isn't used quite as much as it was maybe 5 years ago. So people still may need it, so we certainly wanted to keep it in there. It's an appendix now, so if you need to teach it, if your students need to learn it, certainly is there for you. In addition to that, I got a lot of feedback, and this has been for a couple of years, that engineer's notebook appendix was really not used. So we pulled that material out as well, and that just helps, the pressure of students seeing this big book and you as an instructor having to skip all these topics. So certainly let us know your feedback if you disagree with this. You know, one of the big services we offer is that we can customize these books for you. So as a reseller, you might choose how you want to teach this advanced part, and it might break the content down even more to specific topics. So, you know, we can certainly customize a book for you so that you can teach that. So certainly reach out to Rhonda and she can give you more information on that. Up next is the Inventor Advanced Assembly. So again, model states will be in that book. Now, the one good thing there is that the level of detail functionality has been replaced. So that chapter will come out and model states will go in. So I'm not anticipating a big rewrite of the content. So it shouldn't affect kind of the chapter order or anything. So there's another, you know, there's definitely more inventor titles that'll be coming out across the coming months and into the fall. So certainly keep an eye on the roadmap for those. Data management is the next title. I just are kind of grouping up titles I'd like to talk about. And this is all worked on by Barb Nash. She is busy working on the first two books here. You can see that are coming out in June. And she kind of gave me a high level idea of, you know, how the enhancements to Vault 2022 are going to affect these books. And it kind of affects across all of them. You know, certainly there's the new details dockable panel that really makes it easier for users to view details directly in Inventor versus having to go into Vault to interface. So that's a nice tool that certainly will be added into the Vault users book, and then maybe in Vault group, work group, or professional. Not quite sure yet where that will be added. I've mentioned model states. So certainly all of our users are going to want to know how model states work with Vault. So that absolutely will be put into the Vault for Inventor Users Guide, and then also likely into the Vault Professional Users Guide as well. Duplicate search is something Autodesk has been kind of transitioning and updating functionality over the last couple of years, and we'll continue with that update as well in our guides to reflect all the new changes. There's some administrative changes as well, so those will go into the Vault series of books, that the Essential series of books. Likely for the user management side would be in the Basic, and then replication again will be covered in Vault Professional. And then Barb mentioned that the thin client is likely going to be a substantial change because they've now really reworked the interface and the functionality of that web browser interface for Vault. So definitely that will be enhanced within the Vault Professional Learning Guide as we kind of near the summer, end of the summer, to have that guide out. And next up, what I'd like to do is talk about infrastructure and review. So this is kind of all of our civil and Navis Infraworks titles. This is all worked on with by our developer, Jeff Morris. So he's kind of given me a really great idea of what's been changed. So certainly over the last couple of years, the Civil Fundamentals Guide has transitioned and had a lot of improvements, and this year is kind of no different. He's worked to merge the data set of the overall site plan in that same plan that's used in other courses. So as an instructor, you know, the feedback we're getting is they want that so that it makes it a lot easier for you to teach, and it's familiar, and it makes kind of that workflow and that story merge a little better. In addition, roundabouts. So that's something that infrastructure designers are really using more commonly now. So we wanted to incorporate that into kind of along with the intersections material into corridors. So I have a little image here of kind of what was done there in terms of implementing that in our guides. We've also expanded on the grading and the pressure pipe material. So that's enhanced as well. Assemblies is now its own chapter. So it had previously been merged with, I think it was the parcels chapter. So now parcels has been moved to the appendix to make room for the rest of that material that's really been expanded. We got a lot of feedback from instructors that parcels wasn't something that was taught, I shouldn't say taught, but used as much in design. So we moved that into the appendix, and certainly, you know, as an instructor, you can certainly teach that. You can grab that out of the appendix, but it really, in terms of timing for this course, it really left more time for the additional roundabouts and the grading and pressure pipe material. And then finally, with Inventor 2022, Civil 3D introduced the new Project Explorer, and we added this content all within the appendix as well. And Jeff also included 3 exercises on this as well. So certainly that's brand new material. It allows users to edit Civil 3D objects, validate their designs, create reports, and create tables all in one place, which is really a super single interface, a super easy way to get to that single interface. And Jeff actually spent some time and actually wrote a blog on this course because there was substantial changes. So if you're an instructor, I would certainly recommend you reading that blog on our website to kind of get more of the details. And certainly you can reach out to Rhonda. We can get you in touch with Jeff if you had any specific questions. The next books that Jeff worked on are the Surveyors and the Land Developers class. And these 2 classes are kind of the next step for release. Both of these, there's not a lot of functionality changes within them. So again, Jeff is kind of just looking at updating the data set, coinciding it with the fundamentals data set. So again, like I mentioned, making it a little bit easier to teach, to see kind of the flow through all of the courses. One thing we do know is coming is in that Land Developers class, which previously we called the grading class, there will be substantial work done on the final chapter. So last year, after we released the 2021 Civil Guide, Infraworks was updated with kind of the .1 release of that software, and it had a redone interface, completely updated. So that chapter is going to be updated to reflect that new interface. And then finally, kind of, titles, the final titles that Jeff kind of works on here, just to kind of round it all out, is Infraworks and Navisworks. Infraworks, we don't anticipate a ton, but the problem with that one is they tend to release a lot of functionality in these dot releases. So looking at the software right now, it doesn't look like a lot, but once it gets released and we can look at it a little later in the fall and know what's happening. We do know that referencing and inserting Civil 3D quarters will be added. Autodesk has really put a lot of effort into this over the last while, so this will be a considerable part of the update in that guide. Navisworks, we've got some great feedback on the 3 additional chapters that we added last year. So we added quantification, rendering, and scripting. So those getting great feedback. People are loving having that material in there. But we don't think we're anticipating any major changes this year. There's no functionality changes that stand out to us. So we'll be looking at the guides, standard corrections, image changes, the same type of thing we do with all of our releases for those guides. I don't really have his BIM 360 guide listed here. This is kind of a TBD book for us right now. As you know, Autodesk has released recently Autodesk Docs, and it seems to be kind of a moving target in terms of how Autodesk is transitioning this and what functionality is going to be available there, what's going to be available in BIM 360. So, we're not going to set a date on that until after kind of he's finished his Civil, Navisworks, Infraworks books, and then we can get a better idea of what's happening with Autodesk in terms of the BIM 360 platform. It is possible even that we end up with 2 separate guides. So we'll see how this plays out, but certainly keep in touch, and we'll keep you posted on where things are going to go with that one. And then finally, the last kind of group of training guides are all around our Revit platform, and our developer here is Charisse Bedolf. And she's also, like everyone else, been super busy lately working with Revit 2022. She's already released the fundamentals for architecture learning guide. So that is available now for you. There wasn't a ton of new content available in the software, so it didn't affect the book too much. So she really spent some good time this year looking at rebuilding all the data sets. So she rebuilt all the data sets using the 2022 Revit template. We started to see over the last year or so, a couple years maybe, that some of the practices sometimes didn't work as expected consistently. So with that rebuild, I think that any of those issues are going to be resolved. So super happy to have had the time to rebuild all those files. In terms of new content, she did add some content around creating and modifying tapered walls, which was new in 2022. She also incorporated some slanted walls into the exercises. She was getting feedback that that was looked for. And then there was another small one just in terms of splitting schedules and being able to place them on multiple sheets. So certainly something that was added into the construction documents area. Also, the final one here, she moved the work sets content into the appendix. So she was getting lots of feedback that it was just too much too early in the class. So initially it was in as chapter 3. And although, certainly it is something in the workflow of using Revit that you should be setting up work sets early on, it was just too much for new users. And they really needed to focus on learning fundamental skills, building their walls and windows and all of that stuff prior to getting into the complexities of work sets. So that is now back into the appendix. As an instructor, you certainly can teach it whenever you want. But in terms of, being able to give a suitable workflow to teach new users, we felt this was needed. The next one that I wanted to just quickly mention, and this isn't actually new in 2022, but in March we released a brand new learning guide that we're super excited about called Revit for Residential Design. So if you haven't heard about it, certainly refer to actually our webpage. Cherise Biddulph actually just did a webcast on that, and it was really well received, and that gives all the information about the guide and why we created it and all of that information as well. So, we were getting over the last couple of years a lot of questions around, is the Revit Architectural Fundamentals Guide appropriate for me? I build houses, and we were getting just a lot of feedback that using a multi-story building that we used in the architectural guide really just didn't suit the need for these grouping of users. So coming out with this book, we have basically a model that looks familiar to residential designers. It's a house that will allow people to learn the fundamentals of actually using models that are familiar to them. So definitely take a peek at Cherise's webcast. It's a great learning guide, and we've already had a lot of great feedback, and we'll be updating that one as well later in the fall for 2022. And then finally, the last two courses that I wanted to mention are kind of around the structure and the MEP. So again, Cherise right now is working on the structure guide, and that should be out before the end of the month. She's no major changes or enhancements to the software this year. So the focus really here for her is she's focused on updating the images, and she's noticed that there were a number of them that were considerably out of date throughout the last number of years. So now they're up to scratch kind of with 2022. So you'll notice a lot of new images in there, a little bit of new content around rebars, and as well as framing evaluation. So you'll see a little bit of content in there, but again, the focus here was around updating images. The Revit MEP guide, she hasn't really looked too much into this one yet, but based on customer feedback, she actually does know that she's going to make one big change. So we had heard from a couple customers, and one in particular, who really felt that the workflow in the book where we talk about heating and cooling analysis wasn't really appropriate where it was. The reason being is that most customers actually export the data to use another engineering software to actually do that analysis. So we've rewritten the content, we will be rewriting the content when she gets to this guide to really focus on that exporting versus doing the analysis. Now she will keep the analysis material in an appendix, so it will be there for you if you need to, but in terms of setting kind of expectations of students as you're teaching, the more common workflow is around exporting the data. So the focus is going to be on that. So that kind of rounds out all of our books, and I guess, you can see here on the image, there's a few other titles in terms of Revit that we'll be getting to next over the course of kind of the summer and into the fall as well. So I guess now, Rhonda, I'll hand it back to you, and you can finish things up.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of our product formats. So our learning guides are available in both print and ebook format, and those do include access to the practice exercises used in the course. So each of the guides has that information in there. Also, our instructor guides are available in both print and ebook format as well, and these are the same learning guides that are used by students with instructional resources incorporated into them. Those resources are answers to the chapter review questions and have timing guides for delivery, as well as some titles also have access to instructor presentation files. Our e-learning bundles are an annual subscription to prepackaged content within our e-learning portal, and this also includes supplemental video content as well as access to multiple software versions of the. We do have other offerings beyond our traditional curriculums, such as documentation services, and most businesses need to produce documentation, but they don't necessarily have internal resources to output that in a final polished format. So to give you some examples, we recently created online help documentation for a software tool developer. We also created an operations manual for an equipment manufacturer. If you're delivering training content for internal users or your customers and you want to ensure that they receive the most effective training possible, we can work with you to add models and workflows into our existing content to create more custom material that best fits their processes and integrated tools. Our team can also employ tools like instructional animations and interactive tutorials to get your users up to speed quickly. So with that, I will say thank you to our team and for everyone joining us today. Here's our contact information.